you have to put on your own imagination and say, well, this is important. So it's not indifferent. But if you think about it and say, well, it doesn't really matter, then you take it to be indifferent. It doesn't make any difference to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I didn't name any specific things, but you can kind of, each person can kind of do that with themselves.
Right. Okay, why is self-denial is essential to keeping Christian liberty in its proper perspectives according to biblical teaching? Well, so you won't go into these in different ways.
I think, Brother Joe, self-denial, as well as Christian liberty, I think self-denial is essential to keeping any biblical teaching, a biblical doctrine. So it's very essential.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Judge others with charity. Now think about what we just said there. Judge others with charity. There are two groups of believers in the congregation at the church in Rome. One group ate meat while the other group did not. God required the one to judge the other with charity. In other words, if Diana don't like goat, that should not be a concern of mine. I love goat. So does he. But that don't mean that everyone in this room should love goat and should eat goat. You know, I should not be judging what Diana likes versus what I like. And I'm just using food as an example because obviously I love food. But we should look at those with different practices not as self-indulgent, but as acting with a desire to please the Lord. Again, you must give attention not to the outward appearance and the use of things and different, but to the inward motive. What is going on inside of the mind? What is going on inside of the heart? Are you tracking this situation in the way that God would have you to track it? Your fellow Christian desires to glorify God by his practice. You do not really know that this is true of your brother, for you cannot look into his heart and read his motives. That's where we get into trouble so many times. I know what he's thinking. I can tell you exactly what he's thinking. You don't know. And you could be so absolutely wrong, it is embarrassing. But both of you bow your heads before a meal and give thanks to God. Both of you are professing to eat unto the Lord. Therefore you are bound to assume that his actions are for the glory of God. Always remember that. Think on the positive side. What is his motive? What is his action? I bet you it's this, that he's walking in the footsteps of our Lord. There may be a Christian who cannot go to the beach without lusting after women dressed immodestly. Now think about this. And I thought Brother Lindy pointed this out real well. This is a decision that you have to make on your own, whether it fits your Christian living or whether it doesn't. Now listen at this. Your fellow Christian desires to glorify God by his practice. You do not really know that this is true of your brother, for you cannot look into his heart and read his motives. I've already read that, haven't I? There may be Christians who cannot go to the beach without lusting after women dressed immodestly. So he denies himself the right to enjoy the beach in order to keep his conscience clear. Remember that. However, he may be tempted to judge all men by his own experience. Well, I don't believe you should go to the beach and look at these slightly clad women, you know. All right, look at the other side of this picture. He may be inclined to suspect that a brother goes to the beach in order to indulge in lustful thoughts. He is tempted to say that no Christian should go to a public beach. Paul says, you are taught to deny yourself, but not to deny your brother. You do not know why he's going to the beach. You may think he's going to the beach to look at the pretty girls, but he may be going down there to get a suntan.
Could be.
You must assume that his heart is pure. You must conclude, I am pleased that he can enjoy a part of God's creation that I cannot.
Good example. That's a very good example.
It is. It is. I thought Brother Lindy explained that real well. That some of us can do something, some of us cannot. Some of us can do something for one reason, the other person cannot. But we should not judge the other person until we know full well what that other person is up to. And then the best thing to do is just keep your mouth zipped.
I think a good illustration of that, if I can say this right, just recently in the paper, there was a photographer that was making pictures, and this girl that was a girlfriend of one of the quarterbacks, apparently a very good-looking woman. And he just made a statement, said, can I take your picture? You are a good-looking lady. And she took it as a compliment.
Yeah.
But some of the people got all upset about it and said he was looking at it the wrong way, and he was wanting to go to bed with it, but that's why he meant it.
Yeah.
You see, they didn't know what was in his heart.
Yeah. I'll give you another good example. Gene and I visited a couple yesterday, Jackie and J.D. They were sitting in their den here a while back, and they could see a flashlight shining through their window. And Jackie come in there and said, J.D., somebody's shining a light in our window. Well, at night, that's not a good thought. That makes your hair stand on end. So J.D. Got his flashlight and went out there and got in his truck and rode down the road, and then a police car with his flashing lights was coming back this way, and J.D. asked him, are y'all flashing a flashlight into people's houses? And the policeman said, well, not intentionally, but there is a, what do they call them, Gene?
Peeping Tom?
No,
I'm serious.
a prowler.
Okay.
A prowler that is in this area, and we're wanting to make sure that he's not harming anybody. Well, see, Jackie and J.D., the first impression they had was a peeping Tom. But whenever they found out the truth, the police were actually protecting them. So you have to be careful.
I think it was somebody that bailed and ran.
Yeah, so you have to be careful before you pass judgment on things. I just wanted to point that out, that you can, and every one of us in here, you see a flashlight shining through your window, you want to, hey, let me get my gun and go out there and get rid of that person. Well, it was the police that was shining the flashlights. And of course, they didn't mean to shine it through the window, but I think maybe they did by mistake.
Okay.
All right, I've lost my place again.
How is God?
Huh? How does God require us to judge other Christians? Not to judge. What should be our attitude toward our fellow Christian being able to enjoy something that we must deny ourselves?
Because we don't know what's in their heart.
Right. Right. Weak and strong believers. In Romans 4:1 we read, him that is weak in the faith receive ye, but not to doubtful dispensations. Here we are instructed that the strong believer is to accept the one who is weak in faith. I understand the problem in the church at Rome to be one of spiritual weakness. The term weak describes me. I mean, the term weak describes one who is weak in his feelings and convictions about things lawful. We find in Romans 15:1 that Paul separates the two groups into the categories of weak, cannot eat meat, and strong. Understand God allows eating of all things. Paul puts himself among the strong. The strong are commanded to receive the weak, but not for the purpose of passing judgment on their opinions. That is, they are not to be received as to follow opportunity to corner them with the intention of criticizing their weakness. On their practices, namely food, days, and wine. Paul exhorts both groups. The strong are not to despise the one who abstains. It is not for me to criticize. It is not for me to correct. The weak are not to find fault with the strong. Gene and I are both diabetics. There's certain things that we don't eat, but I don't criticize the person that can't eat them.
Right.
By condemning what God approves, we presume to be holier than God. You've heard that statement, holier than thou,
Oh, 1,000 times
all the time.
a week.
Yep. Paul emphasizes that there is but one Lord who judges a person's conscience, and each person is individually obligated only to God's will in terms of basic convictions. The Christian's obligation is not to the will of those about him, but to the Lord, who is the judge of all. In Romans 14:1, the strong are commanded to accept the weak. For what purpose? What do you think, huh?
To guide them.
To guide them, to assist them,
Judge the rank.
to uplift them, to help them in whatever situation they may need. The nature of the stumbling block. In Romans 14:13 we read, "Let us not therefore judge one another any more, but judge this rather, that no man put a stumbling block or an occasion to fall in his brother's way." Do not block what your brother may be trying to do. This is the most crucial verse in the